Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our final virtual Art in Focus for the spring of 2024. Here is our object that is joining us for our online conversation. If this is your first time watching one of our virtual Art in Focus events, I'm Michelle DiMarzo, the Curator of Education at the Fairfield University Art Museum. We do these in person in the galleries and then again virtually online. And we do hope they are conversations. So if you have observations or questions or responses, or you watch the TV show Shogun and you need to chime in with your thoughts about that, which is very relevant, in fact, to the object we're looking at today, please feel free to drop that into the chat box and our producer will pass them along to me. We had a lovely conversation in the galleries a short while ago looking at this print in person. I realize I did not put the dimensions in here, but it is let us say, standard size Japanese woodblock print. So if you've seen other ones, you can envision sort of roughly the size that it is. I realize I'm also remiss in mentioning, because I might forget to say it at the end, when we resume Art in Focus in fall 2024, which you can view our fall programs on our Eventbrite page, which our producer is going to drop into the chat right now. We are moving the timing of both the in-person and the online Art in Focus events. We're moving the in-person gallery talks to 12 noon in the hopes that a few more people might be able to join us in person on their lunch hour. And then these virtual conversations will follow at 1 p.m. So just take note of that. If you are interested, you can check out what's coming up on our Eventbrite page. So looking together at this print, I'm going to bring it full screen and in fact, get rid of the caption for now, so we can just feast our eyes on what is on the art object in front of us. In the gallery, we started out by just sharing where our line of sight went and how it traveled around this print, because there is indeed a lot for us to look at. Of course, the thing that is taking up the most real estate and is the most brilliantly colorful is the person in the center, wearing this beautiful blue kimono with what seems to be an overdress or an over kimono thrown over their shoulders, with one hand sort of tucked into the kimono and one hand holding what looks like a very long pipe, kneeling on what seems to me an extremely comfortable looking cushion and surrounded by all sorts of objects. So for some of those who were in the gallery, they said their eyes actually went to what was behind this figure. For me, I'm drawn to the objects that are sort of in the foreground at the bottom of the image. They seem closest to us, in part because, for reasons that will become clear in a few moments, I love Japanese lacquer, and we had a wonderful exhibition of Japanese lacquer objects that I will talk more about. So I went, ooh, lacquer. And it just so happens that we have in our museum collection a lacquer object that is similar to the one that you're seeing at the bottom left. But we'll talk more about that in a second. We were also discussing and trying to sort of figure out the elaborate costume that is being worn here. And I will not pretend to any level of expertise in Japanese culture, kimono, pronunciation of words. So my apologies if I say anything with an improper pronunciation. But we did actually discuss the TV show Shogun. No spoilers will be given here, but if you haven't watched it, it's pretty good. And we were discussing how one of the things that the Japanese executive producer had mentioned was that he had to emphasize to maintain the veracity, the historical accuracy of the show. He had to maintain that the kimono are always worn with the left edge over the right one, never the reverse. And of course, looking at here, we see that this figure is in fact wearing the kimono in that correct fashion. And knowing that it's a Japanese woodblock print, which must of course be carved in the reverse of what it will actually print as, just like a stamp. Raised lines of the design, brushed with ink, paper applied down onto that raised block, pressed with a paddle called a baron, and then peeled away to reveal in reverse of whatever lines were carved. So this block cutter would have had to make sure the designer would have drawn it in reverse and the block cutter prepare it in reverse on the block to make sure that it was accurate and culturally made sense to its viewers. So the beauty of the kimono is not only, of course, it is being folded in the correct way, but it's just covered in so many wonderful designs. You want this person to stand and sort of shake out the fold so you can really get a sense of what's going on. You can see cranes that are depicted along the lower border of sort of the inner robe. a remarkable profusion of, we have floral, we have pattern, we have right around the color. It's not accurate, but would maybe think of plaid. It's not plaid, but this sort of boxy striping. And then this elaborate patterning along the collar closest to the neck. It's just a wonderful profusion, all done in these shades of blue and red. And of course, this is 19th century Japan. We have Prussian blue, that beautiful, vibrant blue color, the same thing that gives the characteristic tinge to Hokusai's Great Wave, done about 32 years earlier. That is absolutely giving us that brilliant blue of the center robe. And in fact, one of our guests, Pat, had mentioned that it was the sort of slightly faded color of the flooring and then the blue of the wall behind that she found sort of the most calming about this image. And we were discussing the way that I was holding the object in the gallery. I'm looking down at it from the top and going, from here, that top edge kind of looks like a window with flakes of snow falling. But of course, as we look at it, there is what appears at the upper left to be the bottom of a painted hanging scroll, a silk painting mounted on silk. So it is a wall. It's not an opening out into the world. And as we look further behind, there's a shelf at the upper right that seems to have a couple of boxes for storage. Another framed artwork, which appear to be chrysanthemums, very traditionally found in Japanese art, behind this figure to the right. Some sort of black box underneath their sort of left elbow, or where they've slung this voluminous overcoat. And then the boxes in the front. Some of you may recognize that the lower left is a writing box with brushes and a little area to mix your ink. The one on the right, I'm not quite sure what it is supposed to be. Someone asked if it might have to do with the pipe that the figure is holding. They're not smoking it, but they are holding it. I don't know, but if you do, please chime in the comments and let me know what you think. What came to mind for me was cosmetics, maybe because of the small container, something for a tea ceremony, some other accoutrements of daily life. Because this person is surrounded by quite a lot of stuff. We have storage boxes, artwork, lacquer objects in the foreground. There is a great deal going on here. But of course, as with so many Japanese woodblock prints, the expectation is that the viewer will know exactly what they're looking at, the name of the person who is behind this artwork, the title, because of all of the text that is part of the object. So we have actually in this one quite a profusion of information about the makers who are behind this object. And we are, as always, indebted to Professor Eva Kovaci, the specialist in medieval Japanese art history, but who we call on for all things Japanese. Thank you, Eva, so much. And she provided the translation of the Japanese inscriptions, allowing us to put together our caption and putting together who this person is. So we have Toyohara Kunichika, I'm trying my best there, as the designer. So the artist, the one who created a drawing or a painting on paper that they would bring to the block cutter, which is interesting that we have the name of the person who carved the set of blocks to produce this print is also included, Koizumi Horikane. And then we also have Yokoyama's name as publisher. So we have three of the individuals who would have been indispensable to the creation of almost any Japanese woodblock print. Yokoyama is the one who sort of organizes all of this, comes up with the commission to give to Toyohara. And without a block cutter, you're not getting from a single individual work of art to a reproducible set of multiples. Now, the individuals who I certainly have never seen credited on any Japanese woodblock print, you don't usually have the names of the printers. So a separate group of individuals who were highly specialized in, if we can imagine, because this is a color woodblock print, you would wind up with a block set where you would have a key block carrying all of the black outline contours and separate blocks carrying only the areas to be printed in color. And in order to make all of those line up perfectly, the printer had to match that sheet of paper to little registration marks around the edges of each block, laying it down precisely to make sure the ink applied in the correct area. Now, if you look carefully at the chrysanthemum that is behind our figure to the right, there is sort of a blob of blue where they don't seem to have been quite so precise in matching the ink to the designed area of the key block, but I think we can forgive them for that. We have a comment in the chat, so I'm just going to jump into that. Oh, it looks like a spool of thread. Oh, that's another great connection to the object. This is Estelle is commenting on one of the objects that's sitting on the lacquer box with a handle at the bottom of the image. I agree. It does look like that was wrapped up with blue thread. That would be a great observation. Perhaps this person has been repairing a rip in the kimono. So the title, which is written at the upper left in Japanese script, running top to bottom, gives us the name Nakamura Fukusuke II as Chūrō Onoe. We have the date of 1865. Back to that in a second. It's a woodblock print. And like so many prints in the Fairfield University Art Museum's collection, it is the generous gift of James M. Reed. In fact, this object he gave us only last year. In fact, when I was looking at our records, we accessioned it into the collection on May 17th of 2023. So just about a year to the day as we have brought it in for Art in Focus. And what Dr. Kavachi was able to share with us is that this specific print is an actor, Nakamura Fukusuke II. Chūrō Onoe is the name of the role that the actor was playing. The title of the play is there in quotation marks. The theater, the Maritza Theater in Edo or Tokyo, and even the performance date, January 15th, first month of the year in 1865. That is I have a close-up on our next slide of these bits of information. That is one of the things that I always find so remarkable about Japanese woodblock prints, their intention to communicate both visually and through text, always combining the two of them. And reminding you that this is Japan, 1865. We are dealing with a very literate populace. So they are absolutely eating up all of the text that is wrapped around, not just sometimes titles, but bits of poetry, things like that that are embedded into the artwork itself. But the little round object, little round guy to the right, that is the seal of the censor, the government official who was responsible for examining prints that were going to be produced and giving them official approval. They contained no seditious content. They contained nothing that was considered inappropriate. And censor seals tend to be very useful for dating Japanese woodblock prints because they are individual to the censor and also to the year. But it just so happens, well, I skipped one, or I put them in a different order than I thought. But we know where the play in question was taking place, where and when. So I included this just to give you one of, first of all, my favorite Japanese woodblock prints, Hiroshige's Night View of the Theater District in Edo from 1856, just a few years before the one we've been looking at. Just giving you a sense of the equivalent of Broadway in New York, but of the equally bustling metropolis of 19th century Edo, modern day Tokyo, as folks are strolling around going to one of the 4 or 5 official theater houses in this district. And the Maritza Theater was one of those prominent central theaters. And what is incredible is that the MFA in Boston, they have a 2-block woodcut that is a giant playbill for a series of plays being put on in the first month of 1865, one of which is a soga play. And that is the actor in our print was participating in that production. So if you are a reader of Japanese, this is filled with a profusion of Japanese characters. And then also you can see plenty of little vignettes from these plays themselves. So advertising to the public when these plays would be performed, who the actors are, what the plots are about. It's just really extraordinary. So you can find that on the MFA's collections database if you are interested in taking a look at this or its matching counterpart on the other side. The actor in our print is participating in the first one that is listed, Momochidori Sagigake Soga. And the soga plays, or sogamono, as they were called, refer to an episode of Japanese history in the 12th century, a pair of brothers, the Soga brothers, who launched a ultimately unsuccessful attempt at rebellion. And somehow their story and the story of their retainers and supporters and maidservants made its way into traditional Japanese theater. And it became tradition that sogamono plays about this pair of medieval brothers would be performed around the new year. So we have January 1965. One of the prominent theaters in Edo is featuring one of these sogamono plays, and they are doing it as kabuki theater. These are photographs that I pulled off UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage website, because kabuki is recognized as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And they're showing some contemporary productions, or fairly recent productions anyway. And I direct your attention to the figure on the right, because that is a male kabuki actor performing in a female role. Although at the very earliest stages of kabuki, women were involved, relatively quickly, they were no longer participating. And the traditional kabuki, as most people have encountered it, only male actors play all of the roles. Male actors who specialize in female roles are referred to as onagata. And I found a very interesting video interview with an actor who specializes in onagata performances. And he was being asked about, what is it like to perform? And he had said, it's not that I'm a woman. He was like, I know nothing about being a woman. He said the roles in kabuki are an ideal of women that is filtered through a masculine ideal of femininity, which was just very interesting to hear someone say. And there is a certain level of exaggeration, as you can see in the makeup, for example, in the actor on the right. Which takes us back to our art object, because in fact, this is a male actor playing the role of a female maidservant in this medieval epic story. So if you had been carefully looking at this earlier to determine whether this was a male figure or a female figure, our conversation in the gallery, all of our guests immediately felt very convinced based on the facial features that this was in fact a male actor, and they were right, and wearing, however, female dress. Now, this is giving you a little bit of a close-up of those lacquer objects. Now, Estelle's comment about it being a spool of thread, I'm seeing almost what looks like a handle, a circular handle coming off the top of that little object, almost as if you could pick it up by that. So I'm really not sure what that object is meant to be. As I mentioned, the one on the left is much more readily apparent. This is the one that the Fairfield University Art Museum owns. It's called a Suzuri Bako, a writing box. And the black tray that you see in both images is where you would grind an ink stick. So ink came in sort of a cake form, like a little rectangle. You would grind a little bit of that there, mix it together with water, and then dip your brushes in to do calligraphy. One of our visitors said that if they showed the image on the right to one of their grandchildren, they would think that area was a phone. I was like, it does actually look like a phone that's been turned off. Yes, that is true. But it's also a good reminder that, you will identify things visually based on your cultural experience and what you bring to it. 10 years ago, would I have recognized that as a Suzuri Bako? I don't know. I might have recognized it as a writing set. So I was explaining, as a child of the 90s, I feel like little girls of my age were very interested in these very cutesy stationery sets that often came in little decorative boxes or baskets. I don't know if those are very popular anymore. But this also allows me to mention a fantastic exhibition that took place January to April of 2020. I was so delighted because one of the women who came to our in-person event, she had actually seen this in January 2020 before the world shut down. It was called Gifts of Gold, The Art of Japanese Lacquer Boxes. And our producer is going to drop a link to the website into the chat if you want to read Eva's fantastic introduction to the show, because Eva Kovaci, the professor who translated that Japanese for us, this was her wonderful show that she put together. And so few people got to see it. So it was really a shame. I didn't bring it with me into the classroom because honestly, I forgot it in my office. But I was able to show our in-person visitors that for this show, we had worked with Eva to find an example of a Japanese lacquer box for a modest cost on eBay that we could just have as a demonstration part of our teaching collection to just give a sense of how absolutely delicate these objects really are. So it was wonderful to be able to make that connection between a show we had, an object that we have in our teaching collection, and a work of art like this one. If you have any other observations, any more guesses on that object that is in the bottom of the screen, if it comes to you after our chat is over, please feel free to email it to the museum. We would love to hear from you. As I mentioned at the outset, just in case I didn't remember it at the end, come the fall, we are going to be transitioning the timing of these live events to 1 p.m. Though, of course, if you're watching it as a YouTube recording, you can watch it anytime at your leisure. They will continue to be added to our YouTube channel as we do them. So thank you so much for joining me. Oh, wait, hold on one second. Marion asked, is the kimono typical of one for a maidservant? That is a great question and not one that I am qualified to answer. I apologize. I will say this is a theatrical costume, so it would be the question of what would be the actual historically appropriate garb for a maidservant, and then in the slightly exaggerated medium of kabuki, what would they choose to represent the maidservant in that sense? So I do not have an answer, but I would suggest the thread to follow, would you be interested, would be to look up more resources on kabuki. Actually, you can find some awesome things on YouTube to watch that being performed. One, it might have been a 60-minute segment from about a decade ago. They referred to it as a cross between opera, theater, and wrestling. And they refer to that because of this sense of sort of slightly over the top sense of, I don't want to say camp, but the grotesquerie, the performance. And it was just a very interesting, very short introduction for myself, who again, am not a specialist in anything related to Japan. But thank you for that question. That is a great question. So thank you for joining me for our conversation about this object, and I will look forward to seeing you virtually in future conversations. Have a great rest of your day.